that, I'm going to put it right underneath the 0. So here's a blue line that means underneath the 0. And then I'm going to put it this edge. So now you can see that the blue lines are not just the edges, but they're other objects, like the other objects in the keypad and also now the title, the display rather, at the top. So I've got all these buttons. They're all sending this message, append digit. So I need to figure out which one is sending it so that I can do the right thing. So let's start writing some code inside the method. So the first thing I'm going to do is declare a local variable. This is just a local variable inside this method. And I'm going to do that by saying let digit equal. So I want this local variable to be the digit that was pressed. Okay? So first thing that's quite different here is what's let? Okay? Why isn't this var? Right? Because var means variable. What the heck does let mean? Well, let is exactly the same as var, except it's a constant, which means you're going to assign this right off the bat, and it's never going to change in this method. Now, Swift makes a big deal of this, and I love this feature, because if I'm reading this code, I know that digit is never going to be changed. This might be, it might have a dozen lines of code, which, by the way, you shouldn't have very many methods with many more lines of code than that, okay? You want people to be able to kind of see what a method's doing. You can use other methods, call other methods if you need to get more code in there. Here I can rely on that not changing. That's big for readability. You'll be surprised how much more readable it makes the code to know that this is a local variable, but it's constant, only set at the beginning. Yeah.
Like variables have the same naming conventions in Swift, like Java, they're like the naming conventions like all caps. Or
yeah. So yeah, the question is, why don't I call digit like all caps digit or something like that, so I know it's a constant? That would be a programming style thing. Generally in Swift, they don't do that. And I'll show you why that is in a moment, okay? Why you don't really need to do that, because you can very quickly find out the declaration of any symbol anywhere with one click, and you'll see that. Good question, though. All right, so I want to let the digit equal the number that's on the sending button. So I'm going to have to send a message to this button. Okay? I'm going to have to somehow access this button. So I'm going to have to do sender something. Give me what your title is. Okay? So this is a good time to talk about the documentation, because being a good iOS developer really demands that you are good at navigating the documentation. Luckily, the documentation is really well plugged into Xcode. For example, if I want to find out about button, all I need to do is hold down the Option key, okay? And watch what happens now. As I mouse over things, everything, it turns blue with a dashed blue line under it, okay? If I click on it, it gives me a little blurb from the documentation about this thing. So it's saying, here's a button is a class, here's its inheritance, here's a little bit of what it does, and really awesome at the bottom here, here's a link that takes you to the detailed documentation. So I'm going to click this little link right here. It's going to bring up a documentation window with a UI button in it. Hello. Did I not click that right thing there? Oh, I hope I don't have a network issue here. Okay, well, I guess I'm not connected to the network. That's the problem. So it's getting this off the network. Okay, so imagine that there was documentation here. And it would have, along this side here on the left, all the instance variables or properties and methods of UI button. And you could click on any one, and in there would have a full description of it here, and all the types that it referenced you could click on in here, and basically it's a hyperlinked documentation system, as you can imagine. I'll try to get the networking working on Wednesday, and we'll take a look at this. But if I was looking in here, I'd look down in the section that says getting the button's current state, and I'd find that there's an instance variable or property there called current title. Okay? This is unfortunate, I'm not going to be able to link these things. But so how do we access a property or call a method in another object? Well, it looks exactly the same, whether you're calling a method or accessing a property, which is you use dot. Okay, this is the same syntax that's used in a lot of languages, is to do dot. And so when you do that, Xcode's going to say, oh, well, here's all the things button knows how to do. Okay? And as you can see, button knows how to do a lot of things because it inherits from a class, it inherits from a class, it inherits from a class that all have lots of methods in them. So when I looked at that documentation, I found that current title was the thing I wanted. Now notice as I start to type a C, it's already cutting down the things that could be starting with a C, and then CU, they cut down even more. I can type tab to get to the first ambiguity point. Then I can type T, okay, and then tab again. I'm here at current title, and then I can press return. Okay, so there it is, digit equals sender current title. What's going on here in terms of sender title? Let's go ahead and print this out to the console just to see what's going on. So I'm going to print len, which is a function, a global function, that takes a string, so I give it a string. And inside that string, I'll type digit equals. And now I want to embed the value of digit in this string. And Swift has a really cool feature, which is backslash, open parentheses, close parentheses. If you put that in a string, and then inside there you put some expression, then it will evaluate that expression, turn it into a string, and embed it in this string. Okay? So it's really easy to println values by using this backslash parentheses. Okay? So let's go ahead and run and see what happens when we press these buttons, see what kind of result we get. It's not going to be quite what we expect, but let's see. All right, so here's our UI. We've got our buttons. That's a good start. And now, and the console, where's the console? Well, watch this. I'm going to press a button, 5. The console appears at the bottom here. See this down here? This is the console. And it's saying digit equals, optional 5. Okay, how about a 9? They're all optional. What the heck is going on here? Okay, this is crucial to understanding Swift. This is probably the most important thing to understand that people don't quite get right from the start. So we're really going to focus here on understanding what optional means right there. Okay, so let's go back to our code and look at this. Oh, by the way, when the console appears down here, you can make it go away with this little button, or you can just drag it out of the way. Okay, but sometimes it's nice to have that console still there so you can look at your output while you're, reacting to whatever you found. In fact, we will leave that there so you can see the optionals. All right, so what's going on here? Well, what's happening here is, well, first of all, don't you find this a little bit odd? Let digit, I didn't put a type. See that? What type is digit? Okay, there's no type in there, no type information whatsoever. So does Swift have untyped variables? No, it's the exact opposite. Swift is very strongly typed, okay? All variables have a type. You have to specify a type. But Swift is also incredibly good at what's called type inference. So we can infer the type from the context. So here, I let digit equal whatever this is, this current title, and so it just made digit be the same type as this, okay? Now, back to the question earlier, so what type is that? Well, if I hold down option, okay, just like we used option to go look into the documentation, we can also option click on our own variables to see, are they constant, are they variables, and what type are they? So watch this. Option click, it says digit is of type string question mark. Okay, string question mark. That question mark means optional. So there is a type in Swift, it's a type called optional. Okay? Optional, that type, can have only 2 values. One value is not set. Okay? This optional is not set. Either it has never been set or someone set it to the not set state. They unset it, if you want to think about it that way. So optional, one value is not set. We call that, there's a symbol for it in here called nil, N-I-L. Okay, that means not set. That's the value of an optional not set. That's the only thing nil means in Swift is option. This is an optional, the value of an optional that's not set. What's the other value that an optional is going to have? Well, the other value is something. It's set to something, okay? And the type of that something is what is specified next to the question mark, string. So really you can almost think of the question mark there, that's the type, optional. And that string to the left is just saying, if this optional is set, what type of thing is it set to? In this case, a string. So we would call this an optional string. But it's really an optional. It's not a string that can be nil. It's an optional that can be a string. Everybody cool with that sentence? That's an important sentence to understand. Okay? So this got to be an optional because this current title method right here returns an optional string. Let's look at that. So I'm going to option down here, click. Look at this. This is the documentation for it. It's a instance variable, a property on UI button. Name is current title. The type is string question mark. And this little get means it's read only. I can only get the current title. I can't set it. There are other ways to set a button's title. You can't set it with this method or this property. So it's an optional. So that's why this ended up being an optional. All right. Well, that's all wonderful. How do I get the string? I don't want an optional. I want that button's string. And the way you do that is you unwrap the optional, meaning you look in there and get the associated value with exclamation point. Okay, what happens if I put that exclamation point there? Well, first of all, let me show you that when I put that exclamation point, look what happened to digit. I'm option clicking on digit. It's not an optional anymore. Digit turned into a string because I unwrapped the optional that came back from current title and got the string out of there. But what happens if this is nil? What happens if this optional is nil? In other words, the button title has never been set. Crash. Okay? Crashes your program. So if you use exclamation point to unwrap an optional, and that optional's current value is not set, nil, then it will crash your program. Now, a lot of you might be like, whoa, my programs are going to be crashing all over the place. And because there's a lot of optionals in iOS. I mean, a lot. Okay, most things are probably optionals because most things, it makes sense they could be in a not set state at some point. And yeah, in this case though, maybe you want your program to crash. Okay? You might want your program to crash because if you had a button that never had its title set and it's sending a pen digit to your controller, you probably want to have that crash so you can find that bug before you ship your program. You see why sometimes crashing is good? Now, if you don't want to crash, there's a way to get around that as well, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But for now, understanding that that's what this exclamation point does, it unwraps that optional and crashes if it's nil. But if it's not nil, it gets to the string, or whatever the optional type is, out of there for you. So now let's go ahead and run again, and we're going to see that digit equals is going to say the number. Okay, it's got the string off the current title. No more optional in there. Okay, good. All right, so now what are we going to do with that digit? We got the digit. We want to append it onto the end of this display right here. Okay, and so let's just do that by saying display dot. Now, again, if we have the documentation, I'd go look in the documentation and it would say, oh, there's a property on UI label, which is what display is. Display is a UI label. There's a property in it called text. See it right there? And actually, you can even see right here the type of that. It's an optional as well, because this label's text might not have been set either. Okay? So it has to be an optional string. Okay, so I'm just going to set that equal. Now, display.text is an optional, so what values can I set it to? I could set it to nil. That'd be legal because it's an optional. See, no warnings, no errors. That would clear out that display. It would not be set to anything. Or I can set it to a string because it's an optional string. So I'm going to set it to a string, and the string I'm going to set it to is display.text, what's currently in there, plus digit. Okay, so I'm going to append that digit on. Let's get rid of that. Okay, now this has an error here. Why does this have an error? Anyone volunteer why this is an error? See, it's pointing right here. There's an error. Back there.
The display.text is an optional string.
Bingo, because display.text right here is not a string, it's an optional. And you can't add a string to an optional. You can only add strings to other strings. So we need to turn this into a string by unwrapping it. And again, yes, this would crash if the display currently has nothing in it. It's not set. Okay? Everybody cool with that? So let's run again. All right, So now 5, oh, it put the 5 on there. 6, excellent. It's kind of working. I don't really like that 0 though. That's kind of weak. 0, 5, 6. That 0 should have gotten cleared out, right? When I first typed that 5. And that's because we really need some way in our controller to know whether we're in the middle of typing a number right now. Because if we're in the middle of typing a number, we want to append. But if we're not in the middle of typing a number, we want to start a new number, right? So let's do that. And I'm going to do that by adding a property, okay? Var user is in the middle of typing a number, which you might say, oh my God, that's a terrible variable. Now I have to type that over and over. This is the last time I'll ever have to type that, okay? Because Xcode is always going to escape complete it for me. Okay, so long names are perfectly fine in terms of typing load anyway. So I like this name, so I'm going to keep it. And it's a bool, okay? So I'm typing, it's giving its type. So here's var, name, type. And notice, look at this little error right here, okay? Okay, sometimes you're going to get errors in Swift that are completely incomprehensible to you because you haven't learned enough of Swift. This one's kind of like that. You see it says class view controller has no initializers. And that's because, and pay attention, in Swift, all properties have to be initialized when the object is initialized, okay? You can't have a property just sitting around not initialized. They have to have a value. Now, if they're an optional, their value could be nil, but they have to have some value. So we can't have this have no value. Now, there's 2 ways to give it a value. One is with an initializer. Unfortunately, I'm not going to teach that to you until next week, so you can't do it that way. Another way is just to say what it equals right here. Okay? And boom, gets rid of all our errors. Obviously, we don't start out in the middle of typing a number, so we're good to go here, right? So now we know whether the user's in the middle of typing a number. We can go down here and say if the user, now again, I'm just going to hit tab to jump past this, maybe a couple times. But if the user is in the middle of typing a number, then we'll do what we were doing before. Otherwise, we're just going to set the display.text equal to the new digit we just typed, okay? And we're going to say that the user is now in the middle of typing a number. Question?
Why would we have to do with display initialize?
Why did we not have to initialize this? That's a fantastic question, and I'm going to talk about that on Wednesday because there's only 1 minute left. But that is a great question, and it'll also, when I talk about it, I'm going to tell you why this is an exclamation point and not a question mark. Because I told you that optionals are made with question marks. So why the heck is this optional? Because that's what it is, an exclamation point. So we'll talk about that next time. All right, so let's go ahead and run one last time here. And hopefully this 0 will be cleared out. It is, and hopefully this will continue to append. It is. So we're in a great spot right here. We've got a calculator. We can enter numbers in it. Next step is we got to make it do some calculating. And we're going to do that next time. So I will see you then.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.